people could customize holiday feeling to him also. And one anniversary market item, the unique lady living in the great cat and freedom. All holiday campaign, society is all and peace and music. And this because the language that includes many ways of mythology, created as a connection, and which will keep on and long life, long and feeling love, peace, loving, and love, and include as a peace and connection, and this will come back and 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 this is which way everything is we are we feel proud because of the profession of others, freedom of labor, freedom of expression. That is people overall did not really support the system of the following and how they call thought and that of people to think that is not how people feel right. People are good at that time, so I think they really can resources and find I guess and happy with the year, making it as well, and more like renewing and today. The work government did not call us into free land this week. England did not vote on holiday meetings, safety meal, schooling, and on Mondays, meetings. And everything to buy, I also just have it out. But other features, I mentioned it for like students to send this to me now, things out events that essential is photos and evidence. I really have been spread throughout passion and society and the education hall that there are of philosophy, mainly quick modernism and new colors. We're not suggesting that this is some kind of human conspiracy or widespread carried out among government officials and outside members of the because no one ever fears. Oh, yeah, it may be. Some who are aware of the restrictiveness of the new color will talk to the exception reason maliciously, but the vast majority of those who spread the new speak and double think of the new color. Lawmakers and policymakers, news reporters, educators and prosecutors, these go unconsciously along with the unexpected homemakers, thought leaders, the bus drivers, and the youth car salesmen. For the concept itself is for the concept itself is fast becoming instinctualizing, accepted by the vast majority of potential exposure in the clinic, but notice the key was unexpected generally speaking, really are spreading in the college. As instead people trying to go out there with the rest of artistic, mob, malleable, mobile, fierce, and modern society as described in the they have been deceived and they are totally unaware of it because the deceived do not know they have been deceived. And they are obvious to the fact that they are victims of a dangerous philosophy. But though the spread of the new tolerance is not inhuman, clearly there is a ground of fire that has been between the technosphere, moving science, theory development, and the success of everything. Without a distinct distinction in the thought of life, he makes the truth of God's way and the power of the gospel, and daily work by the deeds to undermine the Christian faith, and peace is spread in ways to idols of Christianism. And as well, and as we shall see, the topics of tolerance are as diabolical as anything or our imagination. The double thinking of tolerance. Remember the fantasy world of Alice in the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland when after that Wonderland comes to the world of new tolerance. Now I'll give you something to believe, said the queen. I'm just 100 and 100. I'm just 105 months in a day. I can't believe that, said Alice. Can't you? The queen said in a pitying tone. Try again. Draw a line. Draw a long breath and shut your eyes. Alice laughed. There is no use trying, she said. One can't believe impossible things. I dare see. You haven't had much practice, said the queen. And when I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Or sometimes I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. And one of the most basic tactics of tolerance is the resistance that is possible. To believe in possibilities, a tactic dearly reminiscent of Orwell 1984, in which the protagonist George Weinstein was tortured until he swore that 2 plus 2 equals 5 and believed it. In today's tolerance performs a similar feat in the minds of young and old, treating such impossibility thinking as very modern and intellectual. For example, Hinduism teaches that when a soul dies, it becomes incarnated in another form. Islam, among others, asserts that souls spend eternally in heaven or hell. Now, basic logic, the law of non-contradiction exists that 2 contradictory ideas can't both be true. But the new tolerance is grounded in postmodern thought, which asserts, among other things, that logic and linear thought are Western and therefore oppressive. So it's not only possible, it is necessary to believe 2 or more contradictory things at once. And therefore, in the world of new tolerance, all ideas about what happens to the soul when it dies are equally true, as are all religions are. They say all religions, as are all religions, all sexual orientations, all values, all beliefs, even though they may be contradictory. The expectations, of course, are any religion's values, beliefs, etc. that proclaim the existence of objective truth. And that kind of double think works well for the proponents of the new tolerance because it turns the temple of tolerance into a ritual of adulterous beliefs and behaviors, and make it all more tempting to your children, perhaps even to you. The proponents of the new tolerance appear to have borrowed the concept of new speech from Orwell's book as well. As we discussed in chapter 2, fundamental premise of the new tolerance and characteristic of the new speech is costly irritates the person with the person's attitudes and actions. It says that not only are all human beings created equal, but all beliefs, behaviors, lifestyles, and truth claims are equal. As a result, the word tolerant is given a new definition to mean not only accepting a person who is different from you, but also agreeing with, approving, and even participating in the person's beliefs, behaviors, and lifestyle. Drawing such false equivocations is one of the primary tactics of the new tolerance. The non-agreement is a phobia. One of the Orwellian tactics of the new tolerance is a negative labeling of any disagreement or objective as phobic. W. J. Saunders, writing in the San Francisco Chronicle, reported that the reaction of one old-fashioned father who protested the concept of the sex education. His son was a student in public school, and when I complained that my elementary school son was too young to understand homosexuality, the father said they called me a homophobe. They wouldn't listen, they just called me names. And the treatment that the father received revealed the true tactic of the new tolerance. And unfortunately, if your children or your church register any disagreement with or objection to the agenda of the new tolerance, the result will likely be labeling a name calling by the very people who claim to value tolerance.
The nonconformity is deep. Dr. Jim Esses, professor of plant pathology of the Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, was accused of sexual harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power. Students staged a 6-hour sit-in the protest against him, his own chairman, and being pursued charges against him, and he was made to answer charges without being allowed to know what they were, and he endured this discrediting attempt investigations in 2 years. He had to stand by as the press parading accusations against him. And was Dr. Ezra's crime? What was Dr. Ezra's crime? He had posted flyers on campus offering help to homosexuals, and a flyer offered free to students and policies. Carefully researched scientific information about the cause of homosexuality and guidance for homosexuals who wish to lead the homosexual lifestyle. Gay activists complain, however, that if posters and encouragement to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students to repent and go straight, viciously aggravate the self-hatred and depression that gay people are forced to feel. The group dashed direct action to stop homophobia and accused IS of creating a hostile environment and encouraging violence against homosexuals. Interestingly, not one student or faculty member requested a packet of research. The animosity that was aimed at Dr. Ayers was based not on the substance of his research, but on the emotionalism. His opponents managed to create. So when the Campus Crusade for Christ launched a similar poster in the ad campaign called Every Student's Choice, telling of homosexuals who have found acceptance in the church and deliverance from the homosexual lifestyle. Fellow newspapers refused to accept the ads, and the University of Virginia group posted a flyer comparing Campus Crusade for Christ with the PKK and bearing the slogan, "Cruelty and hate, dishonesty are not Christian values." This packet of labeling any opposing view with words like hostility, hatred, crudity, and bigotry was repeatedly proven effective for the proponents of the new tolerance. Conviction is federalism. One of the necessary results of new tolerance is the loss of conviction. See Chapter 4. If no truth is any more true than any other truth, then there is no truth worth defending. If there is no truth worth defending, there is no room for conviction, and particularly religious conviction, and even more particularly Christian conviction. As a result, those who have been deceived by the new tolerance naturally view a person of conviction with suspicion of or contempt. Several dishonors Clunius for the San Francisco Chronicle quoted the mother's comments about her children's public school experiences. My children's teachers say they want students to think for themselves, but what my children say, they think they should obey their parents or God. They're ridiculed. And what kind of diversity can you have when children are pressured into thinking a certain thing? But that kind of reaction to religious conviction is the only possible result of the philosophical system. It contends that all truth claims are equal, except truth claims that say all truth claims are not equal. In today's climate of intolerance, if you and your loved ones display strong Christian convictions, their convictions were clearly viewed as fanatics. As the symbols of discriminators. Another key tenet of the new tolerance we speak is the, uh, the dissemination of Christian creeds, prayer symbols, and similar expressions of faith as discriminatory. For example, the local chapter of InterVersity Christian Fellowship on the Collegium Advent University campus was expelled from the school student union, making it ineligible for funding access to facilities, etc. The reason? The IVCF requirement that club members sign the InterVersity Statement of Faith. The student union claimed that such a requirement violated a policy allowing equal access to all clubs. In other words, it is discrimination for a Christian club to expect its members to access to a Christian creed, or consider the case of Bishop Knox, a school principal in Jackson, Mississippi. The student body at Knox School had voted to have a prayer read over the school intercom each morning, and Knox allowed the following line, Secure and prayer to be read. Almighty God, we ask that you bless our parents, teachers, and country throughout the day. And one word of this morning exercise reached out, the ACLU protested, we renewed. Knox was dismissed, and of course there are frequent instances of community, Christmas trees, major themes, and other Christian symbols being banned, such as the case one December in which parents of public school students were asked to come to school and share with the class about Kwanzaa and the religious holiday practices of their Buddhist faith and Muslim faith, as well as the traditions and practices of Hanukkah. And one parent attempted to share the true meaning of Christmas using a nativity scene as a visual aid, and the presentation was prohibited. In a society dominated by the doctrine of the new tolerance and any regulation of or reason to Christian creeds, prayers, or symbols, or those even remotely so, is seen in a top-side dominant culture. Christianity is ceased to discriminate against other cultures and faiths. Never mind, of course, that we now live in a day and age in which Christianity is often victimized by the one bigotry that seems to be acceptable by these days. Bigotry against Christians, according to one commentator, this bigotry against Christians and the Christian faith is not only acceptable, but even laudable, because in the new speech of the new tolerance, Christian creed prayers and symbols are a dangerous form of discrimination, since they each proclaim a unique kind of Jesus. The selective segregation and injustice. In the 1950s and 1960s, the civil rights movement in the United States waged a war against segregation. At that time, many public restaurants, restaurants, schools, and even drinking fountains were designated for use by whites only. And Oklahoma required separate telephone booths for whites and Negroes. Arkansas implemented separate gambling tables, and many courts had separate Bibles for swearing and witness. And as a result of the civil rights movement, such respectable practices were abolished. And similar campaigns also fought segregation by class in India and dismantled that existed in South Africa until the early 1990s. But ironically, one of the results of the new tolerance is a new way of segregation and division along ethnic and cultural lines. For example, the University of Pennsylvania recently funded a black yearbook, even though only 6% of the student body is black, and all other groups appeared in the general yearbook. Ambassador Math and the University of Illinois have allowed separate graduation activities and ceremonies for a majority of students. California State University at Sacramento has established an official college within a college for blacks in the International Black Buyers and Manufacturers Expo and Conference. In association, we present more than 1,000 black-owned businesses. Recently informed large American firms like Hallmark Cars and Giant Seas that products related to Kwanzaa or late December celebration of the African years should be produced and sold only by blacks. A similar incident occurred when Welshman Jonathan Price and Filipino Lee Salongo were cast to play the leads in the musical myth The SAIGON on Broadway. Asian actress processed as a white actor playing the role of a Sudanese Lebanese pimp trying to immigrate to the United States. By the end of the year, the producers awarded the role to someone with the appropriate racial qualifications. Filipino Chinese actor Francis Revival. Perhaps the most dramatic example of their selected segregation is justice. Deportation is occurring in Quebec, Canada, where the drive to politically segregate French Quebec from the rest of the nation has been increasing. Monochrome trials commences. The bitterness of French Canada's drive to improve its century-old confederation, whereas English Canada tells us much about our understand agrees in the strength and beauty of multiculturalism. They are a living recreation of the warm and cozy nation based more on hope than on history. A multicultural harmony is stressed. One looks at Canada and wonders whether the Canada naive and confident the American celebration of cultural diversity, with its insistence on a few rights over individual rights, the sectarian history over American history, ethnic culture over the common culture, is leading us down a path from which there is no escape. In the world of the new poverty, selective discrimination and segregation are not only legitimate but laudable. If the discrimination or segregation favors a majority group over the so-called dominant culture, in the U.S. and Canada, of course, this dominant culture is unclearly identified as white male English-speaking and Christian, of course, who gets to divide which cultures are dominant is unclear, and whether such dominance can be shown objectively is never considered because in the postmodern view, truth does not exist. Only the power to win the argument with promote one's own ideologically matters. And by drawing such false equations, the new tolerance paper new Mexican society that relates postmodern ideas and to suppress the Christian ideas of righteousness, conviction, freedom, and justice for all, and in so doing, it threatens the rights and faith as well as those of your children in your church. The false harms and the tolerance and the notion of an oral exclusion, disagreement, and distance were labeled fault crimes and were still punished. The era of the new tolerance has ushered in a new oral approach to disagreement. For instance, over the past 3 decades, I have addressed known to high school and college students about Jesus Christ in a historical event for his life and resurrection, and when I began pouring a lecture, I would often get heckled. I even welcomed it at times because the hecklers would respond to the substance of my message saying such things as prove it, and I don't believe you. This given me the opportunity to support my statements with evidence. In the past 2 years, however, I was witness a startling shift, and now rather than responding to the substance of my message, my detractors invariably say things like, "How dare you say that? You are intolerant. Who do you think you are, that you have this corner on truth? And what right do you have to make a moral judgment on someone else's lifestyle?" The issue is no longer the truth of the message, but the right to proclaim it. and disrupts any message that challenges intolerance, either explicitly or implicitly, constitutes a thought of crime. And just as in moralism, one of the tactics of intolerance is to respond to such thought crimes with punishment and persecution. For example, in January 1994, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that a 1970 federal racketeering law, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO, applied not only to organized crime but also to abortion protests such as Operation Rescue. And RICO has not been applied so vigorously, if at all, to other protesters such as legal groups, animal rights organizations, and marine relief, or homosexual activists, as Frank James, professor of the law in the University of Denver and the former Colorado County Judge, commented, "If I were an abortion protester and handed it to protect it, like my house, I might think twice before running Operation Rescue." Abortion protesters the hold a special strategy perhaps to their political threat. Their political strategy force and then an accomplished student writer was apparently guilty of all crimes too, and legitimacy in offices. The editor of significant emergency to be the new author of magazine. The number of science, however, when the magazine flew into New York for a formal annual editor and several Christian magazines and men's writing. And the Scott media recalls me, he was a decent feminist teacher at the Catholic Church in Southern Texas. He said the U.S. of the Darwin theory of evolution, as they know, and the rest of the media went downhill very rapidly, and after that, news was the news at the time. The question took, and he was also an excellent fundamental Christian, and do you believe in the sense of the sensitivity of life? And those were guilty of all right. Just crime holding the wrong belief and not holding the right one. For such thought crimes, scientific magazine certainly happened. Rejecting them as the author of the magazine was popular column. After all, something just can't be tolerated. The strategy and practice of the column is encouraging the working of when you speak eradicating thought crimes are not only the mistake of Royal 1984, they also pose a clear and present danger to anyone, even the family, including who does not bow to the teachings of postmodernism. In responding to the questions around his experience with scientific American Young One, I tried to turn the other cheek for now, but at some point I got to put in this kind of discrimination. Before I get to eventually, the Christians don't act now and maybe you who doesn't get a job this time. There is high sufficient to respond. If we do not, our freedom will be hugely eroded, and our children's faith will be hugely undermining. Our culture will crumble all around us, and our churches will be destroyed from within. But for that response to be effective in defeating the intolerant and preserving the faith for us and our children, we need to be mad and simply defend our faith and religious rights. We need much more than that. We need far better than that. We need a strategy, a plan, and we need a positive response that will not only defend but also against the community.
those pause and more itinerary. As soon as it so far, many times I used to keep insert tasks as unsuspecting actors walk into the starring role and giving instructions on the time for it to come. The actor enters crawling slowly across the floor of the stage. I immediately ran back and taking water as the actor's camera rose and went on in and repeats in his bracing voice. Water. When he dressed himself to the warm seat, and the little teacher moved around in the room. Finally, a fellow cast member was on stage and knew that the parents would actually want to close the book level in court exercise. There was another moment, of course, it was a little bit free. The line of the two comments was happening in front of me because the actor's speech was leading unexpectedly into a thirsty man yelling and crying across the desert of the table set. The people would have wondered if it's a paraphrasing. With the response loud and moving, normally the session to those given and the people doesn't go. And from there, Christian tucked the things in front of the opponent. When their waves got loud and may have been really satisfying, his activity moved to you in the fly and blow it. Our fight has three some complications consisting on our hands, then our beliefs to mind in order to make them more effectively. The concept of complicating that by listening. The Christian concept of something that was being lost in Western countries and cultures for me to have been existing more than middle ground of compromise. Between them is a temporary system. So it's a salvation, capitulation, compromise, and conflict are meant to answer what is how do we counter cultural movements that threaten to undermine our children's faith and erode their combinations of right and wrong? How do we maintain and gain our right stand for the truth and righteousness in the face of ridicule, even persecution? Why is an effective Christian response to a culture stepping in postmodern doctrine of new color? The Asian Jews who faced an anti-Christian culture that persecuted and eventually killed them. One said there is a more excellent way. 1 Corinthians 12:31. It is the way of love. Oh, brother, you might be tempted to respond. Is that the best you can do? It may sound simple, after all, when you fall into this complex doctrine. You persuade the meaning in it is for a lot about a culture that is fiercely antagonistic to Christians into the Christian faith, and this is no time to defend they have to be there. The revelation of all we need is love. But what I'm suggesting is far from simplistic, because the kind of love I'm talking about requires to refer to honestly the love of the wisdom popular confliction. In fact, I believe that the reason we tolerance has been sustaining our passion and reason the church response was surreal and going to articulate is because we ourselves to understand what love really is like. The image of real Christian love has grown so deep and so insistent in the minds of the world. And as a result, if we ever hope to respond quickly to the times, we must be actually real Christian love. What is it? What it is, what it does, and what it does not do. I have delivered a test called around the prayer to many thousands of youth around the world. And during this talk, I typically appeal to the audience asking if anyone can give me precise definition of love. And so much pride that I never had an impression after a criticized definition of love is. And on the occasion I exercise, of course I have been Christians to rate the definition of love on food. But how is it required to formulate it correctly? Out of 4,000, only 7 people manage to get a consistent definition of love. And here's the thing, if you don't know what love really is, how can you do it? And all we think we know what love is, we know we're supposed to love God and love. But what does it look like? What does it do? And how does speaking about anything constructed on me by any time? Does it mean ignoring the same beliefs, values, and lifestyles of other people? Does it mean agreeing with them and improving what they do? Does God is called authentic. I believe in speed, social life, and single family, and all especially to everybody. That's how I love this position to let me find things that is not me. Because pushing love is not as a primary situation as things because we are not feeling stable level and because we don't know what it is we are needing to do. I'm going to go here. I'm so sorry to read it. Love as Christ loved you. The Apostle Paul, the Asian Jew I mentioned earlier, communication, stating to the God is for us, really well. So that when we live in love, of love, Jesus concept of companionship with God and truth. It's complimentary privilege as Christ love is why, because Jesus is incarnation of God and love. So John the First, if you want to know what your love is, take a long hard look at Jesus Christ. This is a crucial for those of us living in the age of new covenant. Because as we pointed out earlier, new covenant indicates who I am, is what I do, goes on to the team that any disagreement with or criticism or what a person does is in color of the person himself or herself. The new tolerance is therefore that loving acceptance and approval of even participation in the person's fully believe or lifestyle and truth claims. But that is not at all how Christ love. He did not ignore these a letter. He says to the Pharisees, you are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. He did not agree with or approve of sinful behavior. He told the woman caught in God's people now and leave their life of sin. He did not participate in activities he disagreed with. The Bible says he was tempted in every way, just as we are. Yet was without sin, but he loved us while we were still sinners and gave himself up for us. And that is what it means to love as Christ loved us. It means, first of all, recognizing that it is not only possible. It is optional to distinguish between who a person is and what a person does. Human beings want infinitely more, and is simply the product of his culture, or the sign of his beliefs and behaviors. In order to love as Christ loves, as we must recognize and remember and relate to each person as, number one, a human being created in the image of God.
One of the finest gifts I have ever received is a football signed by a Fergie former professional quarterback, and there is nothing unique about this ball. For all I know, it was bought at a discount sports store, and what makes it unique is its nature. The same is true with us and the female nature. Homo sapiens are not unique, and we aren't the only creatures of flesh and hair and blood and heart. What makes us special is not our body, but the signature of God on our lives, and we are His work of art. And we are created in His image to do good deeds. We are significant not because of what we do, but because of who we are. And every human being in the world, butcher baker, candlestick maker, African American, European, Asian, male, female, young, old, Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant, murderer or rapist, minister or power, choir member, rich man, poor man, beggar, man, thief, is an insignifiable work of art bearing the signature of God Himself. A person for whom Christ died many years ago. Bob, the caller of this book, attended a box lunch auction as a teenager. The young woman in the group had such each made a box lunch for two and only. The auctioneer knew which woman had made which lunch the young men were allowed to do on the boxes, and then they would share the lunch with the woman who made it. And through some careful investigation, Bob managed to find out which lunch belonged to the young woman, and he was beat and who later became his wife. And so I was first how it watched him carefully, and when he began to do it on the particular lunch, he went to run for his home.
He didn't actually experience out that Bob was young, which I think that's interesting.
So in today's era dominated by the new tolerance, Christians would do well to keep in mind that the Paul talks about the founder of Orpheus from the moment of his birth. He was considered a typical threat, Matthew chapter 2, verse 16-18. Indian earliest followers were members of an oppressed people ruled by a political power. He was executed by the street, Matthew chapter 27, verse 27, verse 31. And for centuries, Christians around the world have been forced to follow in the steps of Jesus, and they have been martyred. They have been imprisoned. They have faced persecution and discrimination. They have often come into conflict with government because, as Philip Yancey said, they understood that their faith was not merely private and devotional. It had implications for all of society, such as law, general, morality, health, and human welfare. And for much of the past 2 centuries, Christians in America, Canada, and other Western nations have enjoyed a general of freedom from such conditions. But I believe this is changing, and indeed already has changed to a large degree. And consider the words of Alan Keyes, former ambassador to the United States under President Ronald Reagan. Where do we find the most persecuted Christians in the world? Do we find them in China, where in spite of all, the flame burns brightly and continues to shine out new light and make the place for God's truth? Do we find them in Sudan? I don't think so, because all of your teaching can crush out the flame of truth with all their physical brutality have been proven down through these 2,000 years that they are wrong and the truth marches on. And I find that the most persecuted Christians in the classrooms of our government schools where the assault is not upon the body, but the soul. And I find it in the lies that have been told to our young people, as time again. In case after case, they are trying to pretend that sexual perversion and conspiracy are the normal order of the day. And I find it on the screens of our movie houses and our television shows, where the assault is not upon the body, but upon the truth that shapes the soul. I find it in the homes and hearts of this country. Parents whose rights and obligations with respect to their children's care and upbringing and schooling are being violated every single day by the erection of the structure of the government authority. That though it stands on a separation of church and state, in fact seems to seek to drive moral judgment and faith out of our lives. And I find it in the sterile clinics where abortion assassins carry out daily the murders of the innocent unborn. And with that stroke is not only the physical life of the babe, but the moral heart and soul of our country that I find to be persecution. The Christian consensus that one governed the public and private life of the United States and other Western nations has come on to the point that we no longer live in a post-Christian society. We live in an anti-Christian society, one in which the Christian faith is dismissed or ridiculed, and Christians are considered suspect, and their motives and behaviors berated. As a result, Christians are increasingly faced with the challenge of living in two irresponsible kingdoms. In one of their many attempts to trap Jesus, the Pharisees asked them whether or not they should pay taxes to Caesar. And Jesus, upon showing them the picture of the emperor and the inscription on the Roman coin, answered, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God." Matthew chapter 22, verse 21. The wisdom of the reply left them amazed, and I believe part of the reason they were so amazed at his answer was that, as always, Jesus saw beyond the surface issue and went to the heart of the matter. And the heart issue was then, as it is now and always has been, how does a Christian live victoriously in two kingdoms? For that is what we are called to do. Jesus said in his great priestly prayer in John 17 that his followers are in the world, added, but not of the world. In other words, we live in a kingdom that is ruled by the devil, Satan, the prince of this world, Satan. John chapter 12:31. But ruled by the devil, the prince of this world, John chapter 12:31. But our citizenship is in heaven, Philippians chapter 3:20. So as Christians, we have the unique distinction of God's citizenship, and we are temporary citizens of the country in which we now live, which is part of the devil's kingdom, and we are permanent citizens of heaven, the kingdom of God. Two different kingdoms, two different sets of standards. In many cases, those standards are similar, and thus that living in two kingdoms poses no serious problem. In other cases, however, we find that the two sets of standards divergently opposed. With us in the middle, how do we handle that? When most believers are of one mind, that under no circumstances we compromise class standards. But what exactly does that mean? And how and where did we draw the line? Romans 13:1 says, clearly states, everyone must submit himself to the governing authority, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authority that exists has been established by God. Elsewhere, however, the Apostle Peter declares we must obey God rather than in Acts chapter 5:29. These three verses instruct us to be a law-abiding citizen of whatever country we live in, to attest that the law of the land does not contradict the greater law of God. And for instance, we should stop at stop signs, drive according to the speed limit, and pay our taxes. But if the law of the land orders us to do something that God's word prohibits, like professing the gospel, because it is an intolerant message that proclaims moral absolutes with objective truth, we must peaceably disobey a lesser worldly law in order to be true to God, greater law. And if we fail to make that distinction and follow through on it, we commit a grievous error. We are in the world, but not of the world. But what does that mean, practically speaking? That's a good question. And one Christians have answered in various ways with various discuss. Strict separation, people want a completely non-religious state, or the separation of traditional religion from all civic matters, imperialistic separationists. Those who fall into this category advocate a neutral state, but still allow religious values to influence government policy as long as the policy is considered a public matter. The institutional separation. The goal here is a free-centric state with the government receiving a development materially toward the ideal of Christian religious institution and values. The non-Christian those who subscribe to this argument believe that government, although non-sectarian itself, maintains a strong interest in preserving and fostering truth in the best interest of the public and as a basis for morality. The restoration basically believes in activity as a pivot for Christianity to the status we believe it held in early America. They want to see this country become a Christian nation again. And although there are various opportunities within all these potions, most Christians fall into one of these categories. Our purpose here is not to advocate or condemn any of these potions, but as Christians, we all citizenship. So we should be the best possible models of the solution, even as we remember that our greatest, most lasting victory was achieved not in Washington or Ottawa, or in any of the world's capitals, but on the house of Calvary. And that is the true reason God has called us to do our citizenship, so we may exercise the ministry of reconciliation. Given to us by Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:18, when we do that, by living and proclaiming the gospel of love and truth. Flashpoints. In science, a flashpoint is the temperature at which vapors, such as gasoline fumes, accumulate in the air when exposed to blindly? And what should a Christian do when government politics and policy unite with the new tolerance? In a comfortable combination, what does the real Christian love look like in such situations? And what does it mean to aggressively live in love while humbly standing for truth? Those are the questions we'll seek to answer as we look at the new tolerance, answering such issues as the church and state life, and death in marriage and sexuality. The church and the state, because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, is the front to the doctrine of the new tolerance, which claims that all belief believers and true Christians are equal. The government is repeatedly called upon by the proponents of the new tolerance, who often constitute a disaster influence in the government, to cleanse our schools, towns, cities, states, and provinces of Christian ways being elaborated. And for example, consider the flashpoint. The imagery in the Northeast surrounded by Montana goes on in 1980, where Martin crafted people wood to December 2 stone tablets and used a wood burner tool to etch the Ten Commandments into the plaque. He displayed the plaque in his home, and then later in his law office, and when he became a district judge in 1992, he hung the plaque in his courtroom and began a habit of opening his court session in Paris. The American Civil Liberties Union ACLU and the Alabama Free Thought Association sued, claiming that the prayers and songs were violations of the Alabama and the U.S. Constitution. Entirely a judge of Montgomery ruled that Mark could keep the plaque, but would have to stop the prayers. And when in January 1998, the Alabama Supreme Court threw the case out, ruling that the parties who had brought suit had no standing to do since they had no legal disagreement with the judge, the spokesman for the ACLU. Publicly announced his desire for someone who was affected by more of the religious practices filed a lawsuit. And similar to ACLU in Columbus, Ohio, requested that the federal court stop the state from inscribing the state motto, which was adopted in 1969 and the Ohio State House. The reference to the motto, "With God all things are possible," the ACLU lawyer contended that the quote would offend members of the majority religions and would be unconstitutional promotion of religion. The courts aren't the only tool used to pursue and punish unpopular religious views. The recent study conducted by the state former publication director of the National Religious Broadcasters revealed that religious radio and television broadcasters are 7 times more likely than their secular counterparts to be audited by the Internal Revenue Service. And they said that they believe that the executive branch has been using the IRS to go after certain religious organizations and their leadership. And nor do such attacks occur only in the United States, but in 1992, officers of the Colombian government seized transmitting equipment from several 24-hour Christian television stations, one of which was operated by a church in Medicine Hat, Virginia. The reason for the government action: the stations were operating illegally, and this much was true. Technology speaking, the stations were operating without license because it was impossible for an all-Christian television station to receive an operating permit from the Canadian the Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, CRT. The CRT allowed all rock music stations, all sports stations, all news stations, but no all-Christian stations. It took a lawsuit to persuade the CRT to issue license to Christian broadcasters. And when on October 14, 1994, the CRT reversed its position. Gerald Leonard Glenn of the Commandment Center for Law and Justice resolved that he was that for the first time in close to 70 years, Christian stations were authorized to operate in Canada.
The case ended happier than the others do not source of the priority that prohibited a teacher from reading on his desk the Bible he had read earlier during a free period. Another recent incident occurred in the U.S. Capitol building when a group of porters paused to pray and were interrupted and warned that any negotiable prayer would be considered a demonstration that would result in ejections from the building and up to $500 in fines and 6 months in jail. If you or your children have massive talent such and theaters done already, you may account yourself fortunate, but be prepared. The forces of the new Congress will not let your Christian be accused of lifestyle and truth statements go unchallenged for long. So what should we do? How can you respond with Christ-like love? First, keep in mind that Christians seem to be most effective engaging the government on issues of church and state life and death and marriage and family at the local level. And I believe that is partly because we are most effective when we are in relationship with our allies and our opponents. And constantly, it is crucial at all levels to build strong relationships with school board members, city council members, county commissioners, state representatives, members of Congress, and especially with politicians or activists who approve of. I am convinced that if the government leaders and political activists in our communities and nations knew more Christians and were themselves known by Christians, they would have a profound effect not only for the present age, but for the age to come. Take for example the parents timeline of advice taken by public policy, specifically in the family. I was specifically in a common discussion on the University of Colorado. One of the ministers in the finances as a leader of the National Committee Investment Organization. The next was the pride call. She said that just prior to the conference she had Israel. A couple of times before her, she said she had genuine love from our staff during her visit, and that she was appreciated our work, and she could say no if there's anyone that are often common evidence of the evident articulation. Hard pressing with us. I believe that's how we saw it. And that's the idea that we cultivate good relationships, especially with those who disagree with us. It may become easier to tell the walls that divide us. It may become easier to tell the walls that divide us. And if we say we are Christians and read God's word, then we need to be aware of policies for some people to true and true. Which reminds me of the greatest attempts in all those that are part of it. But now we know those people as part of those who have godliness and believers. It is much easier for after leaning towards the madness for when we just ran. And I believe we need to be as wise as goodness and not misinformed. And keep the policy. Learning all we can about political and religion so we can understand the time, while at the same time learning all we can about God, family, as laid out in the Bible. How can we be good citizens of the world, of heaven, or of heaven? How can we be good citizens of this world and heaven? If we are not wise enough to know what either aspect of us. The my sense leads me to conclude that the majority of Christians who are still arguing about having the Ten Commandments are attaching to that. Even a slight more what those commands are, one is certainly not wisdom. Choose your issues wisely. There may seem to be hundreds of things happening in the school, in the community that makes you mad or offending your Christians. But you can speak out on every issue you would seem exhaust yourself in resources. You would also probably gain a repetition of creative people with teacher assessment. Seek out a stern who are sensitive and taught on the piece, or a clear violation of moral decency. They don't think that you must protect everything like business before the cause of text.
and built a coalition. There was a significant number of find other people who agree with me and network with them. And we together on issues that must be addressed. And in the civilization conflict of logic, a coalition of men and women concerning law. The moral and ethical well-being of a community can be a powerful force to win. And no one behind the issue you present is true. When you choose an issue and have a solid solution behind you, be sure you are prepared to answer questions about why a particular strategy and what will make it right. The Bible instructs us to simplify concepts while we are always being ready to make significant. Everyone will ask you to believe in for the hope that is in you, yet is information you are succeeded to succeed with me. And I suggest the other explanation to prepare to fulfill the moral and ethical defense for your mission. And see and learn attention to the stakes of the peace because we live in a pluralistic society. You may be more effective in the day morally values, definite in the values for seriously and personally with those things. I still feel basic decisions in a relation with commitment rather than appealing to a prediction of such outcomes. One making the case towards the resident time. It doesn't mean people shouldn't initially understand the principles of which some are based on character side and relationship skills. It means that you should obey the biblical instruction so that your speech always debate you through your thought so that you may know how you ought to enter a relationship with pluralism. So much power information. Life and death. The second key flashpoint in which semi tolerance rears its head in government today in matters involving life and death. And now, according to the new tolerance, people may believe or claim anything. The only exceptions, of course, are those who claim challenge the postmodern association that all Christians are equal. And it is just here in matters of life and death where art and the government dominated by the new tolerance must quell Christian dissent. For example, the civil disobedience and peaceful protest have been distinctive of the political process in the U.S. since the waves of Washington and Jefferson. They still are in the course of a single daily news cycle, and one may hear or read about a peaceful age arrival conducted on the steps of a State House for protesters, people picketing department stores, students protesting the universal termination of affirmative actions, prison system emissions, and financial aid policy movie stars blocking bulldozers with their bodies in an effort to save the alignment, even illegal aliens demonstrating against policies that affect them. Such protesters are sometimes arrested, sometimes they are persecuted, even fined, but by far the strictest penalties are reserved for those who dare to interrupt the abortion industry, machinery of death. In 1989, the feminist women's housewarming two bipolar demonstrators for blocking the entrance to its Sacramento clinic and charged that the protesters had harassed patients and staff members. In 1991, the Rental Superior Court Judge James Law ordered the five demonstrators to pay the credit to go to American Community County. In 1993, the state court appealed upheld the decision of the state
The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. The defendants apologized to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing that the government awarded effectively unlawful protected for exercising the First Amendment right, which the American evidence they had by ignoring without comment. The court left the penalty trial. In the same decision, the Supreme Court rejected a cease to kill by 16 abortion protesters liable arrested for pregnancy close to the home of an abortion doctor refused to hear a sleeping challenge to career students. Rather than cease an abortion case, protest concern down until by pro-life. Protesters say persecuted as last year's murder based on two racist crime. By the consistency subject abortion practices to many communities that are not tied to others. So the plans of abortion is a challenge to the new product. And adoption law is spreading throughout the days and legalism and citizenship fulfillment. Those who say abortion do not only because they believe abortion would be wrong for them, they avoid the killing of babies and mothers who are out of the womb. The partially void and is partial blood abortion is the other way around. And because the basic premise of their abortion is irrational, with no tolerance.
Why do the courts constantly subject abortion practice to limits and penalties that are not applied to others? Because the opponents of abortion represent a challenge to the new tolerance and doctrine that is spreading throughout the judicial legalism, the legislative, and the executive branches of government, and those who oppose abortion do not only because they believe abortion would be wrong for them. They assert that killing babies in order out of the womb are personally born as a portal birth. Abortion is category wrong, and because the basic premise of their opposition is irreconcilable with the new tolerance, many in government, and not only the U.S. government, view them differently from those who protest the killing of baby seals or the cutting down of redwood trees, and it explains why the Pope John Paul angered so many in French government by visiting the grave of a longtime friend, pro-life journalist Jerome Lebrun, who died in 1994, Socialist Party leader, denounced. So, Pope's action claiming that it might encourage abortion opponents who bear the mark of tolerance. The same kind of treatment awaits those who try to promote biblical perspectives on other issues of life and death, such as assisted suicide in euthanasia. For example, the hospice movement in order of assisted suicide in euthanasia that focus on providing comfort and care for the terminally ill has recently come under attack, and government auditors have begun targeting hospice benefits, which are available when a doctor certifies that a patient has 6 months or less to live, though 85 to 90% of patients do die within a period that is apparently not good enough for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which launched Operation Restore Trust to investigate subject fraud in the industry. Though the effort may have uncovered many instances of fraud, some in the industry felt targeted not because the practices are fraudulent, but because they apparently value the preservation of life too highly. Hospice nurse Michael Evans, writing this in Los Angeles Times, asked what message does it give when Jack Carrigan, who had by early 1998 held at least 76 people, I don't know the words, commit suicide, get front page news on a regular basis with hospice receives coverage. only when the government decides we're letting people live too long. The message, if I might be so bold as to offer an answer, is that the new tolerance has become the order of the day. So what does the more excellent way of Christ-like love look like in such matters of life and death? Remember to aggressively live in love while humbly pointing the truth. Unfortunately, many women choose abortion because it is a non-Christian who cries with them when they receive the news of an unwelcome pregnancy, or because the Christian who are around minister condemnation instead of forgiveness and reconciliation. Too many suffering patients choose assisted suicide because they lack the comfort and support of concerned Christians. And your effectiveness is pointing to the truth will rise as your activity in such things as crisis, pregnancy, counseling, and hospice increases. Try to keep in mind that ultimately it's not you, the proponents of the new tolerance, must argue with. It is the truth. It is not you. They reject. It is the truth. Jesus himself, an opponent of truth, should not be the objects of your hate or your scorn. You should instead be sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, and toward them knowingly that they perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. 2 Philossians chapter 2, verse 10. Never forget the instant needs of those on all sides of the issue. The unborn baby is a human being created in God's image, a precious soul whom God loves. So it's the mother who may be considering taking a life, and be careful to treat both with Christ-like love, doing all you can to protect the life of the baby while addressing the needs of the mother. Sacrificially, it is necessary, for example, to give your time as a childbirth coach pledge, your financial help to buy baby clothes, offer your support in arranging adoption, etc. And slimly don't discount the suffering of the terminally ill patient who cries out for relief or answer such pain. With instead, support compassion alternatives to euthanasia and as assisted suicide with your time, effort, and contributions. So the third one is the marriage and sexuality. The third flashpoint for biblical and minded Christians in the age when government is dominated by the new tolerances and matters involving marriage and sexuality. Just a few examples will illustrate how government and the new age tolerance mix in this era. 2 bills were approved on July 1597 by California Senate Judiciary Committee. AB 257 declared homosexuality to be an official civil right and on an equal level with race and nationality. It also inserted the word sexual orientation into the Fair Employment and Housing Act, and went even further, allowing authorities to investigate and prosecute churches, religious schools, missions, and all other religious corporations that discriminate. The bill also permitted the FEHA investigators to audit the rental records of property owner and personal records of employers, including churches, to see if they have ever discriminated. And these investigations will not require a search warrant, just cause, or even a complaint on file. Gay activists could apply for work at churches and sue for discrimination when turned down, said R. Kearney, executive director of the Sacramento-based Committee on Moral Concerns. In late 1996, the U.S. Postal Service's Law Enforcement Division issued a code of conduct forbidding its 4,600 inspectors and police officers from discriminating against homosexuals even during off-duty hours. The new code required employees to sign a statement agreeing to follow the code, and one employee refused to sign because he said he believes that homosexual is a sin. Another wouldn't sign because he was afraid it would keep him from voicing his opinion against same-sex unions or homosexual pastors at his church. The anti-discrimination clause of this code of conduct declared employees acting in an official capacity were not directly or indirectly authorized, permit, or participate in discrimination based on age, gender, ethnic origin, physical or mental disability, or sexual orientation against anyone, whether or not they are employees, because we are a law enforcement agency of duty conduct that demonstrates an inability to be fair, objective, and be unbiased, and dealings with others will be not tolerated. Although all cabinet level departments, exception the Pentagon, already have rules wherein discrimination based on sexual orientation, the Postal Code is the only policy that attends to employees off-duty hours. Reverend Magnus Ananias at the Family Research Council warns this policy sends the message that people who have deeply held moral beliefs need not apply for the federal jobs. And this is a reverse discrimination of the worst kind. Such discrimination and increasingly persecution of those who hold biblical convictions in matters of affecting marriage and sexuality will be the order of the day in a system of government dominated by adherents of the new tolerance. And all these things seem to confirm Philip Yancey's words of warning. Every year, the Church in the United States draws closer and closer to the situation faced by the New Testament Church. In the embattled majority living in a pluralistic pagan society, Christians in places like Sri Lanka, Tibet, Sudan, and Saudi Arabia have faced open hostility from their government for years, but in the United States, with a history so congenial to the faith, we don't like it, and we wonder what should we do about it. How do we respond in a Christ-like manner to government policy that undermines biblical standards of marriage and sexuality, and in some cases persecutes those who hold such standards? It is impossible of those, of course, to provide specific responses for every imaginable circumstance in which government assails us or our faith. Still, the following are just a few examples of responses that may be helpful. Do not answer ignorance with ignorance. Too often we Christians, perhaps because we know the truth that brings freedom, tend to point out the sins and shortcomings of others rather boldly without the slightest acknowledgement of our own imperfections. It is a constant but worthwhile challenge to cultivate the habit of humanity that says, you know I'm a sinner too, and I don't have it all together, but let me say, counter principles, not people. It is people, of course, who advance wrong thinking and behavior, but to be effective, you must attack moral principles, not people. Stick to the issue, stand firmly for principles, but resist the temptation to attack your opponents. And just before the Apostle Peter admonished Christians to always be ready to make a defense, 1 Peter chapter 3:15. He commanded us to be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult, giving blessing instead. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, verse 9. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 or 9. And just following his endorsement of a ready defense, he advises to keep a good conscience so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 16. Defend the God of ordained institution of marriage between a man and a woman, not only as biblical, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, but also a foundational to fabric of society, a determinant crucial for the optimal health and development of children. This would mean compassion and portion, not only to homosexual youth. What is it saying? To fabric of society, demonstrate crucial of reproductive health. This would mean compassion, opposing not only to homosexual youth, but also to bigamy, polygamy, and dual. In this, as in error, be alert to account and overthink the notion that contradicting others cannot be true. You speak the false equations of new tolerance, such as who I am equals what I do, and non-agreement equals phobia, etc. When you hear him, don't allow those who disagree with you to label your agreement as discrimination or phobia, kindly but firmly resist their labeling tactics. and look for opportunities to distinguish between homosexuals and homosexual behavior between gays and the educated gender. Take pains to communicate loving acceptance of the former, even as you different from the latter. Fight fire. Love natural tendency, of course, is to fight fire with fire. But remember, the true and the way to the new tolerance is offered the Christian love. Follow the great example of the Christians in Michigan when they local printer and jointly refused to print material promoting the homosexual agenda. Homosexual activists reacted angry, planned a demonstration in front of the printer shop. And on that day, demonstration, police and news crews lined in the streets and prison violence. And then the wonderful thing happened. About 150 Christians began arriving, bearing more than 1,000 cookies and gallons of hot coffee and a cold punch that they intended to offer to the homosexual demonstrators. And when fewer than 10 homosexual activists showed up, they were welcomed by the Christians who showed them with refreshments and conversation, and a potentially oppressive situation was diffused by another outpouring of Christian love. So that's it for now. I'm so tired now.